Let me tell y'all something real quick. Your emotions are valid, but that doesn't mean they should be your master. See, too many people out here are making lifetime decisions based on a temporary feeling. Stop letting your emotions run your life. You're not a fool, so stop acting like one. Now I know that might sting a little, but sometimes truth ain't supposed to feel comfortable. It's supposed to wake you up. You ever met someone who flips out over the smallest thing? Somebody cuts them off in traffic, boom, whole day room. Somebody doesn't text back fast enough, suddenly they're spiraling into nobody loves me mode. See, we live in a time where people let their emotions dictate every move, every word, every choice. And then they wonder why their life is in chaos. That's what I call being an emotional fool. But let me tell you this, emotions are like weather. They come, they go. But if you build your house based on storms, you'll never have a strong foundation. I'm here today to talk to you not as someone perfect, but as someone who had to learn the hard way. You cannot live a successful life being a slave to your feelings. You've got to lead with wisdom, not emotions. Emotions are real, but they are not reliable decision makers. Stop giving emotions a seat at the decision-making table of your life. Every emotional reaction is not worth a response. Silence and self-control are signs of power, not weakness. Don't let temporary anger destroy permanent relationships. One emotional outburst can cause damage that takes years to repair. Delayed reactions are often smarter reactions. Step back, think, respond, not react. You teach people how to treat you by how emotionally stable you are. Emotional discipline earns respect. Panic and drama repel it. Feelings fade, facts remain. Base your actions on truth, not mood swings. Not every feeling is true. Some are just loud. Just because it feels urgent doesn't mean it's important. Your peace is more important than your pride. Choose peace over the need to be right or dramatic. Learn to pause, not explode. A 5-second pause can save you from a 5-year regret. Emotional maturity is a superpower in a chaotic world. The calmer you are, the more clearly you see, and the better you live. Emotions are real, but they are reliable decision makers. That's where so many people go wrong. They confuse the presence of emotion with the power to guide. Listen to Meg. Just because you feel something deeply doesn't mean it's the truth, and it certainly doesn't mean it deserves to dictate your next move. You might feel like quitting your job because your boss corrected you, but is that the truth or just your ego talking? You might feel unloved because someone didn't answer your text right away, but is that real, or are you letting insecurity control the narrative? See, the danger comes when you start making long-term decisions based on short-term emotions. That's like driving in the middle of a thunderstorm and deciding to make a permanent U-turn just because you can't see clearly at that moment. Would you trust a GPS that kept changing directions every time the weather shifted? Of course not, but that's exactly what people do with their lives. They treat emotions like they're facts, like they know the whole story, and they don't. Emotions are messengers, not masters. They're meant to inform, not command you. I've seen so many people lose blessings, ruin relationships, throw away opportunities simply because they acted based on how they felt in a moment. They let anger speak when it should have stayed silent. They let jealousy whisper lies that push good people away. They let fear build walls around them and then wonder why they felt trapped. That's what happens when you trust emotions to make decisions they were never designed to make. You have to become the CEO of your mind and heart. That means your logic, your faith, your principles, they sit at the head of the table. Emotions can be in the room, but they don't get to vote. You hear them out, you acknowledge them, but then you consult your wisdom before you act. You say to yourself, okay, I'm angry, but what's the truth in this situation? What's the wise response, not just the loud one? Because emotional people react, but mature people respond. There's a big difference. We live in a world right now where emotional chaos is being confused with authenticity. People think being raw means being reckless. They think being real means being rude. I'm just saying how I feel. Yeah, but how you feel ain't always wise. It ain't always helpful. Being grown means learning when to speak and when to stay silent, when to feel and when to lead. If you want peace in your life, if you want stability, if you want real joy, you have to stop letting emotions run your house. You wouldn't give your car keys to a drunk driver, so why do you give life control to unstable feelings? Emotions don't see the whole picture. They see the moment of pain, the memory of fear. But wisdom sees the long game. Wisdom sees the consequences. Wisdom waits. Wisdom breathes before reacting. Wisdom listens. So today, I'm not telling you to be cold. I'm not telling you to be numb. I'm telling you to be wise. Be wise enough to feel your emotions, but don't follow them. Let your heart speak, but let your mind lead. And when you do that consistently, when you make it a habit not to trust every feeling that comes your way, you'll stop being pulled in every direction. You'll have peace. You'll have clarity. and you'll finally stop being an emotional fool. Every emotional reaction is not worth a response. That's a truth a lot of people don't want to hear, because it's easier to justify reacting than it is to practice restraint. But if you really want to grow, if you really want to protect your peace, your future, your relationships, then you've got to understand this. Just because something provokes you doesn't mean it deserves your energy. See, we live in a reaction-driven world. Social media has taught people that every opinion needs a comeback, every insult deserves a clapback, and every disagreement must be settled right here, right now, in front of an audience. But let me ask you something. How many arguments have really made your life better? How many emotional responses have brought you peace? How many outbursts have fixed anything? Very few. Most of the time, they do the opposite. They damage your relationships, they ruin your credibility, and they steal your time and mental strength. The truth is, emotional reactions often come from a place of insecurity, fear, pride, or unhealed wounds. Somebody says something you don't like, and suddenly you're in fight mode, not because what they said was truly damaging, but because it touched something inside you that's already fragile. So instead of letting it pass, you explode, you argue, you defend, you over-explain, and all of that is draining you. There's power in knowing when not to respond. That doesn't mean you're weak. That doesn't mean you're avoiding conflict. That means you're mature enough to choose your battles. Not every comment requires a reply. Not every insult needs a reaction. Not every challenge is worth your breath. You've got to learn to pause and ask yourself, if I respond to this, what I gain? What do I lose? And most importantly, does this even deserve my energy? And let me tell you something, when you're truly strong, when you've worked on yourself, when you know who you are, silence becomes your default weapon. You don't need to prove anything to anybody. You don't need to win every argument. You don't need to let every emotion drag you into a storm. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is nothing. Let people say what they want. Let the noise swirl around you, and you stay grounded. You stay focused. You know what people don't talk about enough? The consequences of emotional reactions. You say something out of anger, and later you're apologizing for words you can't take back. You make a quick decision based on frustration, and now you've created a bigger mess. Emotional reactions are like fire. They feel good in a moment. They feel powerful, but they burn everything around you when left unchecked. And here's the thing. People will test you. Life will test you. There will always be situations that try to pull you into conflict, into drama, into impulsive behavior. But your power is in your discipline. Your real strength isn't in how fast you react. It's in how well you control your reaction. When you reach a level where peace matters more to you than pride, you stop engaging in every little battle. You stop letting people push your buttons. Because guess what? When people know how to get a reaction out of you, it will control you. But when they see that you've mastered yourself, when they can't shake your calm, can't pull you off balance, they lose their power over you. So if you want to stop being an emotional fool, start hearing, stop reacting to everything. Some things deserve your silence. Some things are not worth your time. Some people are not worthy of a response. Learn to conserve your energy for what truly matters. You don't have to attend every argument you're invited to. You don't have to light a fire every time you feel heat. Sometimes the strongest move is no move at all. The next time your emotions start screaming, say something, do something. Take a breath, a pause, and ask yourself, is this reaction worth my peace? If the answer is no, then let it go. That's not weakness. That's wisdom. That's power. That's the beginning of becoming emotionally strong instead of emotionally foolish. Don't let temporary anger destroy permanent relationships. That single sentence carries more weight than people often realize, because anger, when left unchecked, doesn't just burn bridges, it burns down entire homes, friendships, marriages, fan futures. Anger by nature is fast. It's loud. It rushes in like a storm and demands to be heard. But the problem is, what it destroys in a moment can take years, even decades, to rebuild, if it can be rebuilt at all. How many people have you seen say something in anger that they didn't mean? But once the words were out, they couldn't be taken back. You can apologize, you can explain, but the sting of certain words doesn't just disappear. People remember how you made them feel, and those memories sit deep in the heart. Sometimes you don't lose someone because of what happened, but because of how you handled it in that emotional moment. Because you chose anger instead of understanding. You chose your pride instead of the relationship. The problem is not that you feel anger. We all do. The problem is when you hand over control to anger and let it drive your response. When you're angry, your vision narrows. You stop listening. You stop seeing people as people. You stop thinking clearly. All you want is to win the argument, get the last word, prove your point, or make the other person feel the same pain you're feeling. And in doing that, you end up tearing down the very thing you once valued. Think about how much time, trust, and effort it takes to build a relationship, whether it's with a friend, a spouse, a sibling, or even a coworker. It's built through conversations, consistency, shared moments, forgiveness, patience, and time. And yet, a few minutes of unfiltered, angry words can destroy what took years to create. That's the danger of temporary emotion. It doesn't see the value of what it's about to break. One of the greatest signs of emotional maturity is learning to pause in anger. Learning to recognize that what you say in the heat of the moment might bring short-term satisfaction, but long-term regret. Sometimes the best thing you can do when you're furious is nothing. Walk away, pray, write it out, but don't speak until your soul has had time to catch up with your emotions. Because if you speak from anger, you'll speak words that serve your pain, not your peace. You see, anger is not the enemy. It's a messenger. It's telling you that something feels wrong, that something hurt, that a boundary was crossed. That's okay. But it's not wise to react before you fully understand why you're angry and what the right response is, because the goal should never be just to release the anger. It should be to resolve the issue without creating new wounds in the process. And sometimes the person you lash out at isn't even the one who hurt you in the first place. You carry old wounds, unspoken pain, past disappointments. And then something small triggers that build up storm inside of you. And without even realizing it, you pour all that stored up anger onto someone who doesn't deserve it. And now the damage is done. Don't lose people who love you because you never learned how to process your pain. Don't sacrifice connection for control. Don't say things you'll regret because you didn't time to understand what your heart was actually asking for. Anger usually comes from hurt, from feeling unheard, unimportant, or unseen. But instead of exploding, try expressing. Say what you feel, but say it with care. Say it with the intent to heal, not harm. The people closest to you are not your enemies. They're your teammates. And yes, even teammates will frustrate you sometimes. Even family will say the wrong thing. Even the person you love most will disappoint you. But if you let your emotions have full control, if you let anger speak louder than love, then you'll find yourself surrounded by broken pieces. Apologies that can't fix the fracture, silence where laughter used to be, distance where there used to be closeness. So before you let that emotion take over, before you raise your voice, before you send that angry message, ask yourself one question: is this worth losing them over? If it's not, then wait. Cool down. Come back to the conversation when you can speak from a place of calm and clarity, because at the end of the day, what's more important? Being right or staying connected to someone who truly matters to you. You cannot build lasting relationships with emotional explosions. You build them with emotional intelligence. That means learn to pause, to reflect, to respond with intention. That means valuing the people in your life more than the need to dominate a moment of conflict. And when you do that, you don't just protect your relationships, you grow stronger within yourself. You stop being someone who's tossed around by temporary emotions. You become someone who can be trusted with lasting love, respect, and leadership. Delayed reactions are often smarter reactions. That might sound counterintuitive in a world that glorifies speed, where people are expected to have instant answers, snap comebacks, and immediate decisions. But real strength, real wisdom comes from learning to pause. It comes from realizing that just because something happened quickly doesn't mean your response has to be just as fast. In fact, when it comes to emotional situations, responding too quickly often leads to regret. We live in a society that puts pressure on people to react fast. Someone says something offensive and you're expected to snap back. Someone questions you and you feel the urge to defend yourself on the spot. But here's the reality: most of the things you respond to instantly aren't even things you fully understand in that moment. You're reacting to how it feels, not to what it actually is. And that's dangerous because emotions cloud clarity. Emotions add heat to situations that require light. They make everything urgent, everything personal, everything dramatic. But when you delay your reaction, even for a few moments, you give yourself the gift of perspective. Let me tell you something. Some of the best decisions you'll ever make are the ones you didn't make immediately. That's because those delayed responses came after you took time to process, to reflect, to breathe. You allowed logic to catch up with emotion. You allowed truth to settle in before you spoke. And in doing that, you protected not just your peace, but your relationships, your character, and your reputation. We're not taught to slow down emotionally. We're taught to match energy, to give back the same attitude, the same tone, the same heat that someone throws at us. But the moment you do that, you're no longer in control of yourself. You're letting them set the emotional temperature of your life. And that's not power. That's reaction. That's being a puppet to every situation, every insult, every offense. Delayed reactions don't mean you're weak. They don't mean you're afraid. They mean you're wise. They mean you value peace more than drama. They mean you care more about being effective than being impulsive. See, when you wait to respond, you allow your response to be crafted, not just spilled out in a mess of emotion. You get to ask yourself, what do I want the outcome of this to be? Do I want to be heard or just loud? Do I want to solve this or just win it? Do I want to express truth or just explode frustration? One of the most dangerous habits people have is believing that every conflict needs to be handled immediately. That mindset leads to overreaction. It leads to emotional overload. It leads to arguments that could have been avoided with just a little more time. Have you ever looked back on a conversation and thought, I wish I had waited before I said that? That's your wisdom showing up after your emotions ran the show. But imagine how much damage you could have avoided if you let that wisdom speak first. You've got to become comfortable with silence, with space, with pauses. When something triggers you, take a breath, take a walk, take an hour. You don't need to respond in the heat of the moment. In fact, the truth of most situations reveals itself over time. What you felt so strongly about in the moment might not even matter the next day. What felt like an emergency might turn out to be a misunderstanding. What seemed like an attack might just be someone else projecting their pain. And you wouldn't know any of that if you react right away. When you delay your reaction, you also create space for empathy. You begin to ask, what might this person be going through? You begin to think, what's really happening here beyond the surface? That shift alone can turn conflict into conversation. It can turn arguments into understanding. And that's how you build strong relationships. That's how you protect your peace and your progress. Let me say this clearly. Your pause is your power. That moment between stimulus and response is where your maturity lies. That's where your future is shaped. Because how you react to things says more about you than the thing you're reacting to. People will remember your response more than they remember what caused it. And when they see that you're not easily provoked, that you can think under pressure, that you don't get pulled into every storm, they begin to trust your leadership, your character, your wisdom. So stop letting emotions rush you. Stop letting people's chairs pull you into quick, careless reactions. Slow down, think it through. Let your response come from a place of strength, not stress. That's how you stop being emotionally reactive and start being emotionally responsible. That's how you start making decisions that reflect your future, not your frustration. And that's when you start building a life that's guided by wisdom, not wrecked impulses. You teach people how to treat you by how emotionally stable you are. That may sound simple, but it's one of the most powerful truths you'll ever learn about yourself, your relationships, and the energy you allow into your life. People don't just respond to your words. They respond to your presence, your consistency, your reactions, and the emotional tone you carry into every situation. You may not realize it, but every time you let your emotions explode unchecked, every time you fall apart under pressure, every time you let anger, jealousy, insecurity, or anxiety control your behavior, you're silently giving others permission to handle you with disrespect or even manipulation. When you are emotionally unstable, people walk on eggshells around you. They either start to tiptoe through every interaction, unsure of what version of you they'll encounter, or they start to control you by pressing those emotional buttons, knowing exactly how to throw you off balance. And if you're constantly reactive, constantly triggered, constantly breaking down or blowing up, people stop seeing your strength. They stop seeing your potential. They stop respecting your voice because they can't trust your emotional environment. They don't know if you're coming from a place of grounded truth or temporary chaos. But when you're emotionally stable, you teach people something different. You teach them that you are safe, that you are strong, that you are consistent even under pressure, that you don't crumble every time something doesn't go your way, that your mood doesn't swing so wildly that it becomes impossible to have a real conversation. And in return, people rise to meet that energy. They speak more respectfully. They approach you with more care. They value your time and your space, not because you demanded it loudly, but because you carried yourself in a way that made it clear it's not an option to treat you otherwise. The emotional example you set becomes the standard for how others treat you. If you constantly tolerate disrespect, if you respond to manipulation with emotion instead of boundaries, if you try to win affection through outbursts or emotional pleading, you're showing people that your emotions are negotiable, that your peace is flexible, that they can shake you when they want to, that they can trigger you when it's convenient. And once they realize that they stop respecting your needs, they start playing emotional games. Not always intentionally, but because you showed them that it works. But when you master your emotions, when you build emotional consistency, when you become someone who doesn't get thrown off by every challenge or insult, you become untouchable in a whole new way. You stop giving people power over you. You sending mixed signals. You stop being easy to manipulate. People can still try to shake you, but when they see that you don't respond with drama, with rage, with insecurity, they back off, not because they've changed, but because you did. The most powerful people in the room aren't always the loudest. They're often the calmest, because calm communicates confidence. Calm says, I don't need to prove myself to you. Calm says, I'm in control of me, so you don't get to be. When you become emotionally grounded, if you stop giving away your power every heated moment, don't need to yell to feel heard. You don't need to explode to feel important. You know who you are, and that knowledge becomes your shield. Now understand, emotional stability doesn't mean you don't feel deeply. It doesn't mean you don't cry or get angry or feel disappointment. It means you don't let those emotions govern your behavior, but you feel them fully. But you respond to them wisely. You don't shove your feelings down. You just don't let them run wild. You process them, you sit with them, and you decide what to do from a place of strength, not desperation. And it's not just about how others treat you. It's also about what kind of people you attract and keep in your life. Emotionally unstable people often attract chaos. They pull in others who thrive off emotional drama, who mirror that instability, who feed off of volatility. But emotionally stable people attract peace. They attract relationships built on trust, communication, and mutual respect. Because when you're emotionally grounded, you don't have time for games. You don't entertain toxic cycles. You recognize red flags faster, and you respond with clarity, not confusion. So if you find yourself constantly misunderstood, constantly disrespected, constantly surrounded by emotional drama, maybe it's time to stop asking, why are people treating me this way? And start asking, what am I teaching them about how to treat me? Because the emotional tone you carry teaches louder than your words ever will. You don't have to raise your voice to raise your value. Just raise your emotional discipline. And when you do that, when you become the person who can stand still in a storm, who can listen without reacting, who can speak with authority and not aggression, you start commanding a different kind of respect. Not the kind that's demanded by fear or force, but the kind that's earned through emotional consistency. That's how you change the way people treat you. That's how you teach them who you are. That's how you stop being controlled by emotion and start being defined by strength. Feelings fade, facts remain. That one truth, if deeply understood, has the power to save you from countless mistakes, broken relationships, emotional regrets, and impulsive decisions. But the problem is, most people live their lives driven by feelings, not by facts. They follow what feels right in the moment, even if it goes against what they know to be true. They chase temporary emotional highs while ignoring long-term consequences. And in the end, they find themselves confused, unstable, and disappointed, not because life betrayed them, but because they trusted a temporary emotion over an eternal truth. Feelings are like waves. They rise and fall. They come and go. They can feel overwhelming in the moment, like they're the only thing that matters. But just because you feel something strongly doesn't make it real, and it certainly doesn't make it permanent. You might feel hopeless today and hopeful tomorrow. You might feel unloved in the morning and deeply cared for by evening. You might feel like giving up in one moment, and the next you remember your purpose. That's the nature of emotions. They shift, they evolve. They don't stay in one place for long. But facts stay grounded. Facts don't change because your mood did. Facts don't disappear because your heart is heavy. Facts don't twist themselves to match your insecurities. That's why you must learn to root your actions, your decisions, and your identity in facts, not feelings. Because when the storm of emotions hits, it's the facts that will keep you grounded. For example, the fact might be that you are loved, supported, and capable, but your feelings might say you're alone, unwanted, and a failure. If you let the feelings lead, you might isolate yourself, reject help, or stop trying. But if you hold on to the facts, even when the feelings scream otherwise, you'll keep walking forward. You'll keep showing up. You'll keep believing in yourself. Let me be clear, feelings are not bad. They are part of being human. They're signals. They're reminders. They let you know that something needs attention. But they are not final answers. They are not meant to steer the wheel of your life. If you let feelings drive, they will take you in circles. You'll start things you never finish. You'll sabotage good things because they don't always feel exciting. You'll ruin relationships because they occasionally make you uncomfortable. You'll miss opportunities because they come wrapped in fear. That's the trap of living emotionally instead of intentionally. That's what happens when you give feelings more authority than facts. You lose track of what's real. You start building your life on sand instead of stone. You begin to make permanent decisions for temporary problems. And then you wonder why nothing feels stable, why nothing lasts, why you keep restarting the same chapters in different places with different people. Feelings will tell you to run when things get hard. But the fact is, growth requires discomfort. Feelings will tell you to speak out of anger. But the fact is, silence might protect your dignity. Feelings will tell you you're not enough. But the fact is, your worth has never been up for debate. That's why you need discipline, not just emotional discipline, but mental and spiritual discipline to hold on to what is true when everything inside of you is saying otherwise. And listen, sometimes your feelings are lying to you. Not because you're broken, because you're wounded. You've been through things that distorted your emotional lens. Rejection taught you to expect abandonment. Betrayal made you suspicious of loyalty. Pain made you flinch at kindness. So now, even when something good comes along, your feelings start warning you that it might hurt again. That's why healing is so important. Because unhealed pain will keep making you feel things that are no longer true. And if you trust those feelings blindly, you'll keep pushing away the very things that are meant to bless you. So how do you shift from being emotionally driven to factually grounded? You start by slowing down. You start by asking questions before acting. You start by separating what you feel from what is real. You pause and say, okay, I feel anxious right now, but what do I know to be true? I feel rejected, but is that really happening? Or am I just scared it will? That one habit, pausing to challenge your feelings with facts, can change your entire life. You also need to surround yourself with truth, not just emotionally supportive people, but truth tellers, people who won't feed your feelings but will remind you of the facts, people who love you enough to say, I hear you, I feel you, but let's not make decisions based on that hurt. Let's come back to what we know. Because in moments of emotional fog, a clear voice can be a lifeline. Let me say this, you're allowed to feel. You're allowed to cry, to scream, to be confused. But don't pitch a tent there. Don't build your future in a place that's meant to pass. Let your feelings come, but let them pass through. Let the facts stay. Because feelings fade. Feelings fluctuate. Feelings fool you. But facts, they hold steady. They guide you through the dark. They bring you back home. And if you live your life rooted in facts, you won't be shaken by every storm that passes through. You'll stand firm, and you'll make wiser choices. And you'll finally stop being an emotional fool and start becoming emotionally free.